Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. We're just waiting a couple minutes for a couple of our guests to join, and then we'll get this started. So just hang tight for a few moments, and then we'll get this on the road. Our first guest joining right here, Alex, the Euro expert. Thanks for coming on. Pleasure to have you as always.
Thank you very much. I'm always on time for these spaces. We're really excited for the one we've got today. I feel like, and people are coming in, gonna learn quite a bit about some teams that some obviously we know and others that we don't know, but really have interesting stories going on this season.
Yeah, exactly as Alex said right there. We have a ton of great guests on today, Alex being one of them, and some awesome teams that we're going to look at. There's going to be 8 of them today, and there's definitely been a couple of them that we haven't been able to highlight. So that's just what's going on today. We have another show next week, of course, every single Friday, and we have some fine lads from Firsttimefinish joining us as well, Tom and Ben. So we're just going to get them hooked up with microphones, and then we'll get this started. So just hang tight for a moment. Alex, I don't know if you want to just entertain our guest for a moment here. Is there anything you're currently working on or anything you're excited for on the weekend?
That's all. For the best thing might be, I'm going to give everyone listening a bit of a preview maybe of teams we've got coming up. I mean, we won't give away too much, but some of the teams we're going to speak about today for the people listening, we want to talk about OGC Nice in France, what's happening there and their current rise. We're going to travel to Italy to talk about Fiorentina Atalanta, because Serie A is obviously in quite a balance at the moment with Juventus' struggles, and it's a really entertaining league at the moment. Definitely found it. The last top 5 leagues I'm going to be talking about is Aston Villa. But then we're going outside of these. Going to be talking about some really interesting teams in St. Pauli. For Adam here, PSV as well, with Noni Madueke at the helm and Roger Schmidt really powering through in his second season. Because about RB Salzburg, I'm sure a lot of us are big fans of Karim Adeyemi, but there's a bit more going on in that club. We're going to find out. And also from me, my final one will be talking about Dynamo Moscow, a team you probably, listen, I'm going to level with you. I had never heard of until this season. But my God, really interesting story. Has some interesting players as well. When I say that they've got one of the brains behind Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, I'm not joking. So, yeah, you're going to have to stay tuned for these guys because definitely got some good info coming for you today.
Yeah, spot on right there from Alex. And exactly, some great teams. We have 8 in total all over Europe and some special guests along the way to help highlight those. One of those being, of course, Tom Underhill from Firsttimefinish. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Adam. I'm looking forward to our discussion this evening and talking about a club that's particularly close to my heart at the moment, and then another one that has never really brushed my interest too much before, but this season seemed a really interesting proposition.
Yeah, and Tom, speaking of course about Atalanta, we'll get onto them a bit later, but it's a club that you've known closely. What is it about Atalanta that really makes you want to write a book about it? Because of course that's kind of the big project you have going on right now.
Yeah, it certainly is a big project. It's I first became truly aware of them probably I think it was the 2016-17 season when it was Gasparini's first season there, and they'd made the Europa League. And so then the next season they played Everton in the I can't remember if it was a group stage game or I think it was a group stage game in the Europa League. And that was the Everton of Ronald Koeman and the 5 attacking midfielders shoehorned into a team, and Atalanta just absolutely battered them with their little genius of Papu Gomez. And ever since then I've followed them and saw all the Champions League kind of, let's say, glories of the past few years. And yeah, they're just running a fantastic way. They're sustainable. They never outspend themselves. They've got like the 11th highest budget in Serie A. They're just a fantastic kind of project and template for how you should run a club, and one that hopefully people want to read a book about in July 22 when my book comes out.
Well, if you haven't already been sold on the Atalanta project, we'll get into that a bit later on in the show. But before we now start, Ben's joined us now. He's another co-founder from Firsttimefinish. Ben, how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Can you hear me all good?
Yep, loud and clear.
Cool, yeah, I'm excited to be on. Yes.
Well, then we'll get this started. So this is the 5th episode of the European Football Show, BTL's live weekly podcast. My name is Adam Kahn, and joining me today are Alex Barker and Tom and Ben from Firsttimefinish. Before we get into the show, let's briefly hear from Tom about what Firsttimefinish is and how you guys are looking to bring a fresh and authentic voice to football journalism.
So Firsttimefinish is the site that myself, Ben, and our other co-founder, Ninad, started about a year ago, just over a year ago now. And the essence of what we do is trying to give people the sort of content that you might find on a subscription like The Athletic, but ultimately that is free to read and accessible for everyone internationally. And yeah, we try and hone in on niche topics and tell the untold stories, like a lot of sites claim to. But yeah, we kind of, one of our big features is the Inside Story series, whereby we take a player of interest and go back through their history and speak to the coaches and scouts that first identified them, which is something that you don't see on too many other sites. I think it's quite safe to say. So we've done Erling Haaland, the scout that discovered him, Bruno Fernandes, Jadon Sancho.
Erling
it's an exhaustive
Haaland,
list.
Alphonso Davies, we can go on.
Exactly. It's literally like, I think we did a podcast once. We each made a five-a-side team of the players that we have done, and like we ended up leaving out the likes of, like, we left out Mateus Cunha, Karim Adeyemi, I'm sure we'll talk about today. Michael Elise of Crystal Palace now.
My personal.
Patson Daka is the big one. Ben will. I'll pass over to Ben to kind of. I'm sure we'll brush the Patson Daka side of it.
He's got my tweet pinned to his profile based on the article. I've spoken to Patson for World Soccer Magazine in the past through basically just I have his phone number and everything, so I have a personal relationship with Patson himself. So yeah, and I'm excited to talk about Salzburg and seeing their metamorphosis under Matthias Jassel and without basically all their key players last season.
Yeah, I mean, brilliant stuff there. Maybe if we're lucky next time, Ben, you can bring Patson Daka onto the show and we can all hear a bit of his insight. Yeah. But we're going to move.
Why not?
But I just want to move on then quickly because we do have a lot to get through tonight. We have 8 sides that we need to go through in total, all of them European based. And, there's attractive football, squad rebuild, and brilliant atmospheres amongst the pick. They're all guaranteed to entertain football fans looking to pick up a second side this campaign. And then to kick us off, let's hear from Alex. His first pick takes us to the beautiful beaches of France. Alex, talk to me about the 4-time French champions, OGC Nice.
Yes, so let me talk to you about them. And I'm going to give a bit of background to Nice because I think it's really needed. Certainly for Ligue 1 fans, and I think other people know of them as really the team that's got Lille's manager, Christophe Galtier, basically paid him good money to take into the south of France and have signed quite a few other players. So they feel quite functional. It doesn't feel like the emotional connection you might get, but I want to build that briefly with Nice because you mentioned the 4-time French champions. They all came in the 1950s. Nice are a team who have more recently been in Ligue 2, the second tier French or the top tier. And the fact that they are making big moves now to try and build towards a Ligue 1 title is really interesting because it is actually going to matter a ton. This isn't like the PSG where it's a successful team anyway. They're really building towards something. And that's really come from a couple of years ago when Jim Ratcliffe, English-born Monaco billionaire, bought the club for 100 million euros, which, living in England, that feels really cheap because clubs usually get pounded out for billions. But I need to talk you through this season, or this summer really, the big moves they've made. So, as I mentioned, they signed Christophe Galtier, the man who won the Lille title last season in Ligue 1. They've also brought in interesting players like Andy Delors, proven Ligue 1 goal scorer, Pablo Rosario and Calvin Stengs from the Eredivisie. They've loaned in Justin Kluivert as well, Melvin Bard from Lyon, and also Jean-Claude Todibo, signed from Permanent from Barcelona. There's a lot of names in this team, but I want to really build the team as a picture of how they are because they're quite endearing, really, of the way they play. Now, Gaultier, he plays a 4-4-2 system that is completely recognisable from Lille. And it has parallels to Diego Simeone, but it's a lot more free-flowing and counter-attacking. And the best way you can describe Galtier and his teams and Nice at the moment is, despite how they can be boring at times to watch, you really feel yourself getting behind them. One player I really want to highlight in this side is Amine Gouiri. I've been working on recently as a part of a secret project that we're working on to get French football news. Now, Gouiri or Giri, he was meant to be the darling child of Lyon. We tend to think of Ryan Cherki as that now. I certainly think of him as one of the most talented up-and-coming youngsters in Europe. But really, the main kid who was meant to be him was Giri. But due to a number of circumstances, he only ever made 270 minutes of senior football for Lyon. And he signed for Nice last season He's played as a hybrid between left wing and striker, and this season is paired up front with Kasper Dolberg for Denmark at the Euros. He's got 6 goals in. He's scored 6 goals already, contributed to 6 goals. He's put in the most carries in the Nice squad. What we're talking about today, really, guys, is why you should watch the teams we're talking about. And I really think you should try and watch Nice for Giroud, because not only are Nice playing so well, but Giroud is a guy whose first touch is majestic. He's someone where there's been a lot of articles dedicated straight to this, how when he brings the ball down, he doesn't have to take a second touch to turn back towards goal or reposition himself. Any ball that comes to him, he can take in his stride, and it makes him a really dangerous forward. And yeah, just to round this off, really, that Nice have made the big moves now, bringing in Galtier especially, to get that first title since 1959. And with PSG, PSG's likely going to win a title, but you should never say never, because Pochettino's rightly being criticised at the moment because he's barely made progress at PSG. And I think Nice are going to run PSG really close. We've basically do what we thought Monaco would do this season. Definitely keep an eye on them in France, because they're certainly catching a lot of eyes for the right reasons.
Yeah, spot on there. And I think that another point you said, of course, PSG are the favorites. I think no one's denying that, but we said the same thing last season when Lille eventually to win the title. Another thing I wanted to mention here is, of course, this transfer window. You said, of course, Todibo, Calvin Stengs, Mario Lemina. These are all players with pretty high quality that have been in bigger leagues in the past. And just touching on that Calvin Stengs point, AZ Alkmaar, or perhaps last season, AZ Alkmaar was a team I definitely would have put into this 8 teams to watch. They've had a bit of a fire sale over the summer, and Calvin Stengs, along with Myron Boladu and Coop Miners, are a couple of the marquee players who have left that stadium. But Tom, I mean, you wrote about Stengs in this Inside Stories article for Firsttimefinish a couple of weeks ago. Is there anything you would like to add about him and his talent?
So he's a bit of an interesting player, Stengs, because I think when you look at him play, you'd think he would be a natural winger, like an inverted winger, play on the right side and cutting onto his left foot, and he does do that very well. But he is arguably at his best when he's starting from a central position, kind of drift and pick up space between the lines. He used to do that beautifully for AZ Alkmaar. When I spoke to his youth coach, he said he's an incredibly elegant player. Always, when he took his time to kind of physically develop, he was always quite tall but quite slender, and you can kind of see that now. The thing with Stengs is it's an interesting because I think a few different clubs were touted to be able to acquire him over the summer. Particularly, the dearth of right wingers that top clubs were going for did make Stengs kind of quite a popular rumor going around. He's not there yet. He's not effective enough in the big moments, or is he consistent enough? If anyone saw him during the under 21 Euros, he does go missing at this stage quite a lot, and that sounds like a harsh criticism, but I think it's quite common for players of his age. But he's an incredibly graceful creator, a lovely left foot from range, and under Galtier, I mean, you've seen how Galtier can rinse the potential out of players. Then I think he really could go to the next level.
Yeah, as a final note on Stengs as well, like to add on that, because he plays into something I've been noticing as well, is when you first hear about a Dutch right winger that's tearing it up, you think of this, you might, in your head, you're thinking of like a dynamo who's dribbling past people, but as Tom kind of outlined, Stengs is interesting because he's I think of him more as just like a midfielder rather than a winger. He's so much better picking passes than taking people on. So I'm really interested to see how he fits into the Nice side. He started the season injured, but yeah, it was a great point to highlight that.
Yeah, and like Alex and Tom just said, I mean, his is sorely missed at AZ right now. They only have 1 win in their opening 5 Eredivisie matches, sit second bottom of the table. So you kind of just see from that what a talented player he is and how much he is being missed there. But we're moving on now, because for this next pick, we're going to take a trip through the Alps, swapping Ratatouille for Bistecca in our second stop at the Artemio Franchi Stadium in Florence. Tom, talk about Fiorentina.
So Fiorentina are a bit of an interesting team because they've got a bit of a cult status. Maybe it's because of the 90s and the Batistuta era, or even further back when Socrates played for them in the 80s. They have a bit of a kind of a cult. There's a cult interest in them for the kind of style and what they embody. But for a few years now, they've not really done a lot to justify that kind of status. But this season, currently they sit 6th in Serie A. They've won 3 and lost 2. Although those 2 losses were to Inter and Roma, so it's kind of understandable, really. You wouldn't hold those black marks against them. One of the games they've won was away at Atalanta, which is about as tough a game as you can get in Serie A. And then they also won at home against Torino. And anyone who's seen Torino play will know that is a miserable fixture to come up against. And Torino they're a really tricky team to beat. And Fiorentina have already beaten them this season. Currently, they are outscoring their XG by 2. So it's kind of, they are running a bit hot, and a lot of that kind of comes down to arguably the star man, the one that a lot of people will be watching Fiorentina for this season. That's Dusan Vlahovic. A lot of people were kind of, again, supposedly interested in him in the summer, searching for a physically imposing but athletic striker. So it means that, Vlahovic, Alexander Isak, Gianluca Scamaccia, will all be under a lot of attention and interest this season. But Vlahovic has gone off like a rocket. He's already scored 3 times. Only Dzeko and Immobile have scored more this season. The team is clearly being built around his talents for this season anyway. But last year they finished 13th, which was a terrible season, frankly. That's when they brought in Ribery for the campaign, and it kind of overshadowed the how porous they were as the season went on. Vlahovic scored 21 and assisted 3 in that season, which is quite incredible because really it was only his second full season as a senior, because he never passed 500 league minutes until 2019-20. So he's absolutely, he really has come out of nowhere. And this summer they hired Vincenzo Italiano as their manager. Had gone through 5 managers in the past 4 seasons. You can it's a bit of a roll call of the tried and tested Italian manager. You got Vincenzo Montella, you got Stefano Pioli, Giuseppe Iacchini, and then even Cesar Prandelli in there. So, and to not much great effect because they haven't reached the top 4 since 2014-15. And Italiano had only coached 1 season as a top flight manager, and that was last season when he brought Spezia up and amazingly kept them up, and even managed to score more goals in the league than Fiorentina did. So they took a punt on him, and currently it's looking quite an impressive one. Young manager, a lot of potential, with a young team with a lot of potential. You've got Vlahovic in there, of course. You've got Nikola Milenkovic, who nearly went to West Ham. And so again, a lot of interest seeing whether, what could have been, what West Ham, what the Premier League could have had. And he could easily go to that level, even a higher level at the end of the season if he continues on his trajectory. Gaetano Castrovilli, people might be aware of, an interesting creative midfielder. And then you've got Nicola Gonzalez, who they signed from Stuttgart, who last season was absolutely running hot for a very impressive Stuttgart team. Got 6 goals and 2 assists in only 15 Bundesliga appearances, of which only 10 were starts. He was like a perfect impact attacker to come on late in the games for Stuttgart. And Fiorentina ultimately are unlikely to breach the top 6 or 7, just because the strength of those 6 or 7 is probably combined as strong as it's been in a long time in Italy. But with how they've already started the season, they could prove to be very problematic for those top sides. And who knows, a strong cup run could be on the cards for them this season.
Yeah, some brilliant points there from Tom. And I think out of all the 8 teams we're going to mention today, I think Fiorentina have perhaps the most interesting squad because, like you said, there's a ton of young talent, but there's also quite a few seasoned veterans in there. Ribery left over the summer, but you still have the likes of Jose Callejon, Bonaventura, even Matija Nastasic coming in, of course, played for Manchester City. Schalke will leave that Schalke part of it behind. It goes so well there. But I mean, do you think that this is a side that can kind of have these older veterans kind of bring the younger players forward? Or do you think it's going to be more of the younger players that are kind of stealing the limelight with the older players and just backing up where need be?
I think it'll probably be the latter, to be honest. I think Vlahovic will. I mean, he's already scored 3 times and he's looking fantastic this season. I imagine he'll get very close to the 20-goal mark. Gonzalez is fascinating, although he did get red carded. I can't remember if it was last weekend or the weekend before it, but he did get red carded, so he's got a bit of a hot streak in him that he might have to curb. And again, he was another one that it looked like he was all set to go to Brighton over the summer, and that would have been a fantastic addition for them. To imagine him playing in a Graham Potter side. That would be incredible. But yeah, I think it'll be the younger kind of group will certainly catch the headlines. But, like say, having Nastasic alongside Milenkovic, having Bonaventura and Callejon, in that midfield and attacking line can only help those younger, more junior players. And it's an exciting mix.
Yeah, spot on. Moving on to another exciting mix because we have RB Salzburg up next. And, we talked about Dusan Vlahovic and Nicolas Gonzalez as a couple of U23 talents to look out. But I mean, we're absolutely just spoiled for choice when it comes to Salzburg. Ben, why don't you give us the rundown on the reigning Austrian champions?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think Salzburg have probably gotten stronger, even though they lost a lot of key players over the summer. So we had Patson Daka and Enoch Mwepu leave, and then in the previous 6 months, you had Dominic Soboslai as well, and then the key component, Jesse March, Megan Berisha. So yeah, a lot of key players have left, but if you've guys seen the Sevilla game, Salzburg arguably looked better than ever in Europe in that Sevilla game. I mean, they really should have won that game. They had 3 penalties and they got under Sevilla's skin, and that was away from home in a very hostile stadium in Seville, where Sevilla have had long unbeaten records in that stadium. It's particularly before COVID-19. So that was a really impressive performance. And there's a lot of exciting talent there. I mean, Adeyemi is one, but I also like Benjamin Šeško. And I think Brendan Aronson. But defensively, they brought in a lot of new players. Philip Goh, the goalkeeper, he's been quite good. And Omar Sole was fantastic against Sevilla. Unfortunately, Sole and Kamil Piatkowski are both injured. They're both under 21 players, and they look both. I like them as centre backs because they're quite physical, but they're also good on the ball. They've got pace. Both of them got injured, which is going to be interesting because now Salzburg's first free choice centre backs, bit of a Liverpool situation from last season, are all out injured with long-term injuries. So they're going to be out for a few months. But that gives an opportunity with Salzburg. There's always someone coming up, and Brian Oker started his first game of the season in the Cup this week. And he scored on his debut, and he's an 18-year-old American / Swiss centre-back. I think he decided to choose to represent the American national team, but I'm not 100% on that. And I've been watching him for Liefering. He's an exciting young centre-back as well, so it'll be interesting to see how he settles. I mean, he's going to be probably playing in the Champions League at this point with Salzburg's 3 centre-back injuries.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there, there's probably no team in European football which can deal with departures as well as RB Salzburg. See the likes of Haaland leaving, Patson Daka, Minamino, all these players that were key performers in their best years, and were just replaced with the next young talent coming through. And one of those is, of course, Karim Adeyemi. He's a player you briefly mentioned. You've also wrote about in the Inside Story. And Alex, I know you've also made a couple of videos about him. So from Ben and Alex, why don't we go into him a bit more and see, is he really the next Erling Haaland or the next big striking talent to come out of the Salzburg project?
I think so. I think, you don't have Barcelona, Liverpool and Bayern Munich chasing you if you're not someone special. And I think a lot Patson Daka was highly rated, but I think a lot of the times he just kind of lacked that extra bit in Europe, which Adeyemi is doing now. He even scored in the Champions League last season, if people remember. It was a stick goal against in Moscow. Yeah, and against Sevilla, he won 3 penalties in the space of about 20 minutes, half an hour. It was a pretty remarkable moment. But I think what's exciting about Salzburg is they don't just have Adeyemi. They have Benjamin Šeško, and coming through, there's already Rokosic, who's impressing at Liefering, and Lukas Reichel. The reason why I like Adeyemi is because he is very versatile. He can play on the wing, he can play as a number 9, and he's got the pace, but he's also got the technical ability to go along with that. So he's good in one-on-one situations. And as a typical Salzburg forward, he also presses a lot. His defensive contributions are similar to, probably one of the most defensive strikers people talk about is Roberto Firmino. And I was analysing the two of them and stylistically in terms of profile. Karim Adeyemi has very similar defensive stats to Roberto Firmino. And I think that's something people don't really highlight Adeyemi, but he's also a very good presser, and he wins a lot of balls high up the field. I mean, I think 2 of the penalties that he won was him just latching onto loose balls and pressurizing the Sevilla defense. So I think, that's something to keep an eye on as well.
I'd say with Adeyemi as well, his creativity is what goes under the radar a bit. So when I was looking into him, so I was players that he's definitely exploded this season, but he actually did pretty well last year. He got 14 goals and assists. But he created 11 big chances. Now, obviously, that's going to be swayed because Salzburg are a dominant team. And I'm kind of stuck in 2 minds when it comes to Salzburg now, because to them, they're almost like the Harvard or the Oxford of football. Like, if a player's gone to there and it's spent like 2 years in their team, then you can be sure that they've come out of there with a lot learned. And you can probably say they slot into a top 5 league well, just because of the education you get. On the other hand, loaning to FC Liefering, they're B team, they may as well be, but they're their affiliate club. That's a good decision, because when you watch Salzburg play, there are a couple teams they'll play. Well, not even a couple, but sometimes they'll play against teams in the Austrian Bundesliga, and that team will park 11 men behind the ball, like in a way you don't really see too often. So it can feel impossible to judge at times. I can't remember which game it was earlier season. I think it was Salzburg won 6-1. And it literally, from minute one, the other team had every man on the edge of their own box and they still couldn't stop them. So I feel a little awkward judging Salzburg players, but Adeyemi definitely looks very good. That's been highlighted as well, the defensive work rate too.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting there is that you'll see that, compared to the European matches, there's other attributes which the Salzburg players need to bring to the game when they're playing in domestic football. Adeyemi can't just be this counter-attacking pace merchant, because in the domestic game, like Alex mentioned, teams just park so deep that you need to bring other aspects into the game. I think we've really seen that this season. And unless we want to add anything more to Salzburg, I'll move on to my pick. So Ben, is there any last words you would like to have?
There's a couple of players I'm excited about coming through as well that I didn't mention. One is Nene Dorgeles. I've just been watching Liefering. They just played, and he has 3 goals and 5 assists in 8 games. In 9 games Liefering this season. He's a very tricky technical winger, and I think he's someone who's going to get his debut very soon. He's from the JMG Academy, and if people don't know, that's an academy that developed the likes of Yves Bissouma, Amadou Haidara, and a couple of other high-profile players. That before they were in Mali, they were in Ivory Coast, and they developed the likes of Yaya Toure and Kolo Toure, Salomon Kalou. And yeah, I've been talking to their head coach, their administrator, and he's been very optimistic about the 3 players that are in Liefering right now from their academy. One is Nene Dorgeles, and the other one is Daouda Gundo, who's a left back, and he's been starting to make his debut and kind of emerging as a sort of backup to the Salzburg left back Andreas Ulmer. And I really like Daouda Gundo he as well as Nene Dorgeles. They're both 18 at the moment. What I like about Gundo is his crossing ability as a left back. So he's a very offensive player. It reminds me of Trent Alexander-Arnold sometimes. So definitely keep an eye on those 2 as well. But there's always talent coming through. And Brent, I don't think we've talked enough about Brendan Aronson as well, because I think he is a very talented player too. Just kind of going back to, obviously, people say like the Austrian Bundesliga isn't the strongest, and it definitely has a big disparity. But I recommend watch the Bundesliga in the second half of the season when the table is broken into halves. Then the competition becomes a lot more even. I mean, last season, Sturm Graz did quite well in Europe as well, and there's a few teams that are quite good in there still. So it's not always as one-dimensional as people think. I mean, the last 2 seasons, Salzburg just scraped the title, really. So I think it's also a good education for the Salzburg players to play different styles. And I think for Adeyemi specifically, playing against teams with partner bus has definitely helped him to develop his, to not make his game one-dimensional.
Yeah, some great additional points there, Ben. And I remember, I believe it was 2 years ago, this Corona season, which seemed to go on forever, where it was Lasker Linz that almost won the title, were not for a couple of weird Corona regulations that ultimately got in the way. But I think we're going to move on to another side outside of the top 4 leagues, and I'm going to continue that trend by dipping into the Zweite Bundesliga for my selection. There's a reason why Germany's second division is being heralded as the greatest second division of all time. And it's been in no small part to the exhilarating attacking football from Hamburg's finest, FC St. Pauli. After 7 match days, they sit in 3rd place, and that's ahead of the likes of Schalke 04, Werder Bremen, and city rivals Hamburger SV. And the first thing that really stands out to me about them is their system. Manager Timo Schulz has favored a 4-3-1-2. It's a diamond midfield, and it's not something you see often. I think the last time that really stood out to me was in 2015 when Allegri brought Juventus to the Champions League final. And I think RB Salzburg, the team we just mentioned, I think they've toyed with it a bit as well. And what I really like is that it gives a lot of space for these fools to bomb up the pitch. You have the wonderfully named Lea Pacarada, who bombards up the field from left back. Take a look at a couple of his long shots this season and you won't be disappointed. And it also allows them to overload the midfield in possession. It means opponents are always forced to attack in the wide channels, and they can really suffocate oppositions with their press. And I think that it also, what makes it kind of exciting is that it gives them kind of a two-man strike force, something we don't see very often in this day and age. They have a really fearsome aerial duo with 1.87 meter Guido Burgstaller and the tallest player in this season's Zweite Bundesliga. That would be Simon Makienok at 2 meters and 1 centimeter. And, they've been pretty prolific so far. Burgstaller has 5 goals and Makienok has 2. And those two both came in the 3-2 victory over Hamburg SV, a Stadt derby rivalry that is one of the attractive matches in this Zweite Bundesliga. And now, before I move on to look at some of the reasons outside of the pitch to keep an eye on St. Pauli, I also wanted to touch on a few of the young players or just players in general to keep an eye on. There is perhaps not as many as RB Salzburg, but one who really catches my eye is Finn-Ole Becker. He's a 21-year-old academy graduate, and he recently signed a pre-contract agreement to Eintracht Frankfurt next season. I released a Twitter thread a couple of weeks ago, which kind of looked at some of the biggest talents in the Zweite Bundesliga, and he was one that really stood out. He's great engine and eye for goal, and he's exactly what you need in a box-to-box midfield role that demands a lot in and out of possession. And the next two I wanted to highlight were Afiza Remo and Daniel Kofi Kere. I know here at BTL and perhaps at Firsttimefinish as well, we have a lot of fans from Nigeria and Ghana. So I think it would be important to give these two a mention. Remo, he's our 21-year-old Nigerian defensive midfielder, and he's really come into his own this season. In and out of possession, I've seen huge improvement from him, and he's just going to grow further and further into what could be a future Nigerian international. And Kofi Kere, he's a Ghanaian. He's the creative presence in this Pauli attack. He's able to drive possession forward with great pace, has a good eye for the final ball, and even has the most assists so far in all of Germany's top 3 divisions. He's recently made his Black Stars debut against Ethiopia, so at 20 years old, we'll definitely see him in a top flight very soon. And I think it's far more than just African talent, though, which made St. Pauli an interesting story. They, in fact, have the most foreigners of any squad in the second division. You have James Lawrence from Wales, Pakarada from Kosovo, Jackson Irvine from Australia, and so many others, which I haven't mentioned. And this multiculturalism is a bit of a tough one there. That brings me on to my second reason I chose the Kiezkicker as my club to watch. Despite having never won a major title in the club's 110-year history, Pauli is universally recognized for its anti-establishment ethos and outspoken nature. Since the early 80s, they've tackled issues like homophobia, fascism, and racism, and they even have the biggest female fan base in all of Germany. Whereas other clubs think it's enough to just put out a social media tweet every now and then to condemn homophobia or racism, St. Pauli take real action. And just one example I have here was in 2013, when the first openly gay president in German football was subjected to homophobic abuse at an away match. So the following weekend, fans at the Millantor Stadion brought rainbow flag, all 30,000 up and cheered. It's a great video on YouTube, and I think that everybody should go check it out after this. It just shows kind of the values that St. Pauli stands for, and that even though we're in an era where commercial incentives and foreign markets take precedence, they're still able to kind of stick with their community values and find their roots. And I think it's interesting, especially because, we had a club like RB Salzburg who embody these, new era of football where you necessarily have these roots to your local town, but whereas St. Pauli is firmly kind of rooted in the city of Hamburg and continues to show that in how they play football and also kind of what they stand for offside the pitch. And I think it's also interesting that we have 3 British guests here today. If I'm not mistaken, at least I believe we have 3 British today. And I kind of wanted to think of what does St. Pauli kind of stand for outside of Germany? Because I'm kind of looking at it from inside of Germany, but I would like to know kind of what is the St. Pauli ethos and identity kind of represented around the world?
Oh, in terms of its reputation, I think St. Pauli I'd say if you're going to name me like a second tier team in Europe outside of England, I think a lot of people might actually know St. Pauli, generally for the ethos that you've kind of mentioned, and like the acts that they've made. But I've certainly heard of them that way. If you were to ask me, if there's like any sort of equivalent, I don't think there is, but at all in any way. I can't think of the St. Pauli kind of like a one of a kind team. But let's tell what Ben can really think of any. Is there any team like St. Pauli in the UK? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the closest that I could think of would be someone like Forest Green Rovers, perhaps, with their kind of sustainable model. But even that is slightly different than Pauli.
Hamlet, but they're in like the 7th division, the 7th tier of English football. They stand for they do a lot of social justice and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about this St. Pauli story is that you kind of see that even though they're pretty moderately successful when you think about, being inside the Bundesliga, that's still quite an achievement for any club. and to kind of not go into this modern era where it's always about finding the next big transfer fee, all of these things, and kind of sticking to the roots is a pretty commendable achievement. But I think we'll move on then because we have 4 more teams to get through. So that was the first half of the show. And now we're going to move 2,000 kilometers east to the home of 11-time Soviet champions Dynamo Moscow. Since the Russian Premier League was founded in 2001, the Dynamiki are yet to win a major title. But could this be the year they end their 27-year drought? Alex, talk us through it.
That's right. He's done his beautiful research there. Let's talk you through Dynamo Moscow. Now, for the people who were here at the start of the show, I mentioned, I am with you. I'd never heard of this team until about 4 months ago. And don't worry, we're not going to go full football hipster, pretend you know everything about it. But I'm going to give you a bit of a background. So, Dynamo Moscow, they're a team that are quite interesting, have an interesting reputation in Russia. They're often seen as the KGB team. That kind of comes from a history of basically being quite closely tied to the secret police in Russia. But to give a more sporting recent history, and I kind of mentioned that they've not had the best of times in terms of challenging for titles. And in fact, they were relegated from the Russian Premier League in 2016. However, they currently sit in third, I believe, and they are in a completely brand new look. So it's going to give you a bit of a background in terms of staff, right? Nearly all of their staff have arrived in basically since I think it's 2020, very much. I've got it in front of me here. Yeah. You might know some of the names here. Adam might know Sandro Schwartz. He was the manager of Mainz 2017. Schwartz. He was manager of Mainz 2017-2019. Perhaps I'd give a bit more after that. He's currently the manager of the club, and he took it to 7th season. Basically, all of their staff started in 2020. They've had a really big overhaul. And that was when their sporting director came in. I'm going to try and pronounce the name perfectly. In fact, I'm going to be fair. It's Buva. It was a former coach or assistant at Liverpool. And Jurgen Klopp is quoted as saying he has been the brains behind Liverpool's rise. He was there from 2015 to 2018, so that kind of shows he was there right through the rise of Liverpool. Now, it's important to build background of Dynamo's sort of tactical identity, but there's a man I really want to build it around. So just to give you a bit of a footing, Dynamo Moscow, they play fairly attacking football. They're going to press well, but it's nothing too outlandish. But what's really interesting about them is the players and the youth they have. Now, they've got this 5th youngest squad in Russia, and the really big standout talent they've got is Arsene Zakarian. In fact, I think a lot of people would say he's been one of the most, maybe the most talented youngster that's been at the club since, guess who? Lev Yashin, who, just to tie it back, he's their club legend. He was there for his entire career. Now, Zakarian, he's not a world-class goalkeeper. He's a very exciting attacker. He's profiled on goal this year, actually, as well, because he was meant to be in the squad for the Euro 2020, but had to pull out due to injury. He's a well-rounded attacking attacker. He plays off the left or the right. He's not really much of a dribble-heavy player, but he's very intelligent with his movement. And he's got a good sort of footing around him as well in terms of the right mentality. He was turned away from Zenit when he was 14. He was screened by the club, sent away from St. Petersburg. And obviously, Zenit have been the most successful team in Russia since they were taken over by Gazprom in 2005. But that's really given him a bit between his teeth. I've watched Zakarian this season quite a lot, and I've made a video on him before because he's instantly stood out as a really talented player. And to answer Adam's original question, can they win a league? That might be a bit much because Zenit are doing their whole interesting. They could have been included in this, but they're making the right moves. I mean, they've got the Russian Premier League could often be a place for sort of Premier League rejects, and it's certainly got that at the moment. They've got Fabian Balbuena in defence, a former West Ham player, and their bench option really is Clinton Ng, the Tottenham legend. But I recommend giving Dynamo Moscow a watch, especially since the Russian Premier League is free to watch on YouTube every weekend. It gives us a handful of games you can watch for free on YouTube, or you can pay like $2.99 to watch it with English commentary. So definitely, if you ever have a free evening, check it out. You might be surprised.
Yeah, I think it's a great shout there. It's definitely one that I didn't know too much about, but I'm definitely looking forward to maybe catching a couple of games this season. And like you said there, I think that they may not be title candidates this season, but I think that this is kind of a project where almost get in early, see how they get on the next 1 to 2 seasons, and then you could be, the guy in the pub that's been watching the best team in Russian football since the past 20 years, because there's a lot of really exciting factors in this. And I think you also mentioned briefly at the very beginning, Sandro Schwarz. I mean, it's a great manager to get. We've seen some other German managers excel in recent seasons in the Russian top flight, chief amongst them, of course, Domenico Tedesco. But I think that Sandro Schwarz comes from a great schooling at Mainz. It's a club that brought through the likes of Jurgen Klopp and Thomas Tuchel. And whilst I don't think Sandro Schwarz is necessarily on that level, it's definitely a great acquisition, which can kind of see this club go into a new era. Still a young manager, of course. I think he's 39, I believe, or
around
in his
that,
early
yeah.
40s at most. Exactly. So he's definitely one that can kind of see them move into a new era, and sitting in second place after 8 matches is not too shabby, because of course Lokomotiv Moscow, another great squad. So there's definitely a lot to be excited about.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to go back inland a bit now. It's quite hard to go further east if we're keeping this just a European football show. So for round 2 from Tom, it's Atalanta Bergamo. It's a club close to his heart. Tom's debut book, The Working Hands of a Goddess, the tactics, community, and culture behind Gasparini's Atalanta, is set to release in July of 2022. But for today's show, let's hear all about what makes them such an exciting project this season.
Well, thank you very much for the plug, Adam. I do appreciate that. But even if going into each season with kind of having an interest in Atalanta is always an interesting kind of position, because they will never ever truly shake off they'll never truly be one of the biggest teams in Italy, just because of the infrastructure that lies beneath everything will always be that of a mid-table club, or at least for the foreseeable future. So every season there is always a sense of like, well, anything close to what happened the season before will be fantastic. And yet year on year they seem to be getting, if not just maintaining an exceptional level, as being probably pound for pound probably the best attacking team in Europe, bar for maybe Bayern Munich and Manchester City. They just keep rolling on every year, regardless of personnel, and it just shows it's a word that gets used a lot in football, but I think people really can regard Gianpiero Gasperini as a genius of attacking football. But this season, it did over the summer. It was an interesting window. They lost 2 major players in Pierluigi Golini and Christian Romero, who both went to Spurs, and it was their first full season without their icon and absolute revered club legend Papu Gomez. From researching and spending a lot of time with people close to the club, the respect and love that the fans have for Papu Gomez goes almost to Messi and Barcelona levels. He's an absolute worshipped son of that club, and yet he left in January after an intense falling out of Gasperini. So this is the first fall. This really was a bit of a new chapter for this team. But in Golini's place, they brought in Juan Musso from Udinese, who's been a very underrated goalkeeper for quite a while now in a poor Udinese team. It was pretty much him and Rodrigo de Paul and not a lot else. And if anyone saw Atalanta's game against Villarreal in the Champions League last week, they'd see that Musso pretty much kept them in single-handedly. He was very impressive and a smart acquisition for them. And then to replace Romero, it was always going to be difficult. Romero was voted as the best defender in Serie A last season, and probably his star probably was more than anyone else's in Italy. He was owned by Juventus, and then he was loaned to Atalanta, only for them to then buy him and then loan him out to Tottenham. But his brand of defending is quintessentially Bergamaschi, in terms of, you think of him, he's a sort of chaotic, aggressive, slightly mental centre back that fits everything that Gasperini would want them to do. But with that does come some issues. You can't playing like that isn't going to make you the most solid centre back of all time. And when you've got him, Rafael Toloi and Jose Luis Palomino either side, that is about as chaotic a back three as you could ever get. And at times last season, it would be hide behind your sofa watching them, particularly when defending a slender lead. But they brought in Mary Demiral from Juventus, who wasn't getting very much game time. He suffered quite a serious injury a couple of years ago. At the very least, maintain the quality that Romero had, but also bring a kind of a steely assuredness and kind of calm that even Romero isn't. Romero is one of the most talented young centre-backs around. Demiral is a bit more of a calm head. He's a quite underrated passer. One of Romero's biggest traits is his long passing. He kind of, if you compare him to the quintessential kind of long passing centre back is Alessandro Bastoni of Inter Milan, but Romero is very much every bit as good as him. And Demiral, although he doesn't pass long as frequently, is every bit as accurate arrow. So they've been very shrewd in replacing 2 quite key elements of their side. And then there's perhaps the big move, and maybe my favourite move of the entire window for any club, and that was Atalanta bringing in Tone Koopmeiners from AZ Alkmaar. And he single-handedly could elevate this team. If anyone's seen them yet, in his brief appearances, he looks like an absolute natural in that central midfield role. Because Atalanta, what they typically do is they defend very wide. They try and shift the play out wide when they're defending. They try and kind of funnel the ball out wide so that they can then gang up with their wing backs, wide attacking midfielders, and central midfielders. They play in a 3-4-3, and then the 3 on each side of the pitch can kind of gang up and box in the ball player. force a turnover and then just flood forward, either with those wing backs or even come centrally where there's just a void of space. I remember Gasperini once explained that why Papu Gomez was so good as the 10 in an Atalanta team is because all he has to do is follow the referee. You have all these players that go out wide. Even the attacker, Duvan Zapata, will kind of drift out to the left and right. And all that's left in the middle is the referee and Papu Gomez. And for someone like Koopmeiners, although he's not an attacking midfielder like Gomez, to be able to move out wide, physically win the ball, and then spread the play either to the other side or just force it through the middle where there's just this void of space, I don't think there's many better players than him to do that. And he's coming into a kind of a midfield setup that's about as set as you can get. If you give Gasperini pretty much any two central midfielders in the world that he could choose from, I think he would still probably pick Martin de Roon and Remo Freuler. He was quoted as saying once that an interviewer asked him about whether I can't remember who it was now, about whether Mario Pasalic was going to play or Ruslan Malinovsky was going to play in attacking midfield, and Gasperini just said, "It doesn't matter as long as we've got de Roon and Freuler, everything will be okay. They're steady hands. They defend tirelessly. They have no ego. They do everything the team needs them to do, and they also add a bit of quality in that they do progress the ball very well." In Koopmeiners, you have a personality who will do all these things, but will also add a passing quality that's very rare throughout the rest of Europe. Plus, he's a captain. He's captained AZ Alkmaar at 21. He's played at centre back and a back three. He's an exceptional acquisition for roughly £14 million. It's an insane transfer. And how Atalanta managed to do it without a bigger team coming in is kind of testament to the project that he could clearly see they were offering. And then the other side is the attacking side of Atalanta will always take over. It doesn't really matter who they've got in there. Gasperini can work miracles with whoever he's given. And they've still got Duvan Zapata still there, Luis Muriel still there, Malinovsky still. You've got Miranchuk in there. So you can expect them to score minimum 70 league goals again. And it's just a case of whether they can capitalise on Juventus' demise. And I mean, Inter started very well, but whether I doubt they'll defend their Serie A crown. So are you looking at Atalanta's first ever league win? I mean, I certainly hope so for my book sellability, but yeah, definitely one to watch if you haven't already.
Yeah, Tom, you're absolutely speaking my language there, especially around Team Koopmeiners. I mean, he's one of the players that I wrote an article last year talking about some of the undervalued players in Europe's big leagues, and he was top of that list. I mean, just a fantastic young talent, and for that price tag, 14 million, I believe, it's just a fantastic deal for what is a current Dutch international and also the future of that side. I think another player that I wanted to mention shortly is just Robin Gosens and Joachim Mele, the two flying fullbacks in this Atalanta setup that really excelled at the Euros. I think especially Joachim Mele and that Danish side was one of the players of the tournament. How big of a coup is it for Gasperini to keep a hold of those two, and how important are they to this Atalanta setup?
I mean, Gasperini's wing backs are absolutely essential everywhere he's been. We had two very successful terms at Genoa, where he again played 3-4-3. If you ask any Italian football fan about the modern 3-4-3, we're not talking 3-4-3 in the kind of the traditional Catenaccio kind of defensive style. If you talk anyone modern 3-4-3, they'll all say that's Gasperini. Gasperini's inspired the likes of Juric, of De Zerbi. The wing backs are into him. And when he first went in, he kind of bred through Spinazzola, who of course was so fantastic at the Euros. And now he had Gosens and Hateboer. Hateboer hasn't played so much in the past kind of year or so. He's been quite strict with injuries and form. And also Joachim Mele came in and was very, very good last season, very good during the Euros. Played quite poorly so far this season. That might be a kind of long-term effect of the Euros and not having a kind of a pre-season break. But yeah, keeping Gosens is absolutely essential. And I do wonder whether if you look at some of the players that Atalanta have sold, a lot of players do struggle when they're put in another system. I think if you think about players that truly have succeeded outside of Gasperini's teaching, outside this team that they're in, I think you're maybe looking at Franck Kessié, and even he took a good couple of seasons to come to life after he was so brilliant for Gasperini's first Atalanta side. So I wonder if people kind of look at Gosens and Mele and Malinovsky and just sort of they're a bit reluctant because they're unsure about how supercharged they are by their current manager. But yeah, absolutely everything to that system.
Yeah, I think especially Gosens there. I mean, it's impossible to think that he would have been playing as a German international were it not for Gasparini. I mean, just a couple of years ago, he was playing in the 5th tier of German football. So just a meteoric rise, which owes a lot to Gasparini and his attacking tactics. But that was our second Serie A edition, Atalanta Bergamo, a side that Tom is writing a book on. So make sure to look out for that in July of next summer, I believe, 2022. And so now we're going to follow up this second Serie A side with our second Premier League outfit. Ben, you're going to go for the claret and blue of Aston Villa.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this Villa team. I think they're still gelling together, obviously, with Jack Grealish leaving. But I don't if people watch their FA Youth Cup final run, and they obviously won the FA Youth Cup final as well. There's a lot of exciting young talent there, and I'm looking forward to seeing the likes of Chukwuemeka, Jacob Ramsey, Aaron Ramsey, and someone who's really impressed me in the League Cup games was Cameron Archer as well, getting more action and minutes in the first team. It looks like Jacob Ramsey has kind of already established himself as a regular. He's started a few games, and I think they bought very astutely in the summer to replace Grealish, bringing in Ings, Buendia, and my personal favourite, Leon Bailey. I mean, he's already got 3 goal contributions in 3 games for Villa, yet to start a game. Electric 20 minutes against Everton. And I spoke to his agents after the game, who's also his father, Craig, and he's going to be out for 2 weeks, which is a shame for Villa because I think he was starting on such a good momentum. It's kind of a shame that he's had 2 week injuries in between the season. But I think once he gets going, he doesn't tend to be that injury prone. Once he gets going, Bailey is someone who is going to be the new star of this Villa team, and he's someone to keep an eye on for sure. I think Villa fans are very excited to have him, and they should be excited because he is someone who I see as a superstar. Like, he's someone who can become one of the best players playing outside of the top 6 in the Premier League. And I think he's also someone who could get close to, if Villa were ever to sell him, get close to Grealish's tag.
That's quite a bold shout there, Ben, but I think you're spot on. I mean, Leon Bailey, it feels like he's been around forever, but he's still just 24 years old. And I think that even though we maybe saw it just in flashes at Bayer Leverkusen, the types of goals and the amounts of goals that he's able to score is just incredible. I mean, some exceptional strikes in his time at the Werkself. And I mean, you mentioned some of his young talent as well at Aston Villa. You know, you have the likes of Carney Chukwuemeka, Jacob Ramsey, and the list goes on and on. But one that I briefly wanted to touch on is actually on loan right now. On loan to League One club Ipswich Town is Louis Berry. You know, he's one of the biggest talents in English football, had a brief spell at Barcelona. So talk to me a bit about him and kind of his future at Aston Villa and beyond.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I think he probably prefers playing as a number 9. And that's why he played in the FA Cup against Liverpool. He scored against Liverpool. But I think he's a bit too small and a bit too frail to play at number 9, especially in the Premier League. So Villa have tried to do is they've tried to transition him as a winger. He's been playing a lot on the left wing for the under-23s, and that's why he's going to be playing at Ipswich in League One, physical, tough English lower league football. And it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts to that physicality. And it's going to be a good learning curve for him. I think what I failed to mention is just how good Villa's defence is. So someone who I rate very highly is Ezri Konsa. I don't think he gets the appreciation that he deserves. Tyrone Mings seems to be the one who keeps getting call-ups to England squad, but I think Konsa deserves it equally as much, really. And then I feel sorry for Matty Cash as well, because he's been in brilliant form in the Premier League, but with Liverpool, with England's full-backs, especially at right back, I don't think he has any chance of playing for the national team, and that's why it looks like he's going to opt to play for Poland.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that Tyrone Mings-Konsa partnership there, because I mean, a big part of this defense is, of course, also Emi Martinez, the Argentinian goalie, who's probably been the best in the Premier League in the past season and a half. But I think we're going to move on. We have one more team now to go to. That's PSV Eindhoven. But before we go on to that, Tom, I know that you need to leave us now a bit early. So is there anything you'd like to plug before you head on out?
Yeah, thank you for kind of joining us this evening. I had a really good conversation with you all, and just get over to mine and Ben's site, Firsttimefinish, and give us a follow and read some of our newest articles. We've done some really good stuff. Ben did a brilliant piece on Hannibal Mejbri of Man United last couple of days. Absolutely fantastic piece.
Yeah, we got an inside story on Kamaldeen Sulemana coming up as well. We spoke to the Right to Dream scout and the Northland scout as well, which I'm excited to bring to you guys as well.
Yeah, like Adam said a few times, I got a book on Atalanta coming out next year. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. But yeah, thank you for having me this evening.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and I think that that Suleiman episode is going to be fantastic. You know, we had a European Conference League show last week, and we kind of mentioned him as our U23 one to watch. So definitely one you guys should look out for.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was talking to the scout. He's a Tottenham fan, and he's still Suleiman. And I think one thing that kind of gives you an idea about his character is I asked him, like, "Oh, did you speak to him before the game?" And the scout was like, "Yeah, I asked him, like, are you ready for the mighty Spurs?" And Suleiman just replied to him, like, "I'm always ready." And I think if you watched his performance against Spurs, there's definitely an aura of confidence about him. I was analysing the statistics, and he completed 5 dribbles, so 100% of his dribbles against Spurs. And he was also involved in the second Rennes goal as well, taking that shot on from outside the box, which was a bold shot, which was ultimately parried and put into the back of the net by Laborde, I believe.
Yeah, a brilliant player there. But before we go down a bit of a Rennes rabbit hole here, I think we're going to round off this spectacular 5th episode with a trip to the Philips Stadium. That's the home of 24-time Dutch champions PSV Eindhoven. And I think they're truly one of Europe's most exciting attacking outfits. They're in their 2nd season now under the leadership of Roger Schmidt. And whilst they're definitely outside shouts, I do see them pushing Ajax for the Eredivisie title. I think one of the key reasons for this is just the roster. You know, it's capable of both short-term success and long-term financial sustainability. They have a lot of established veterans forming the core. You have 30-year-old Davy Pruppa. He has 100 Premier League appearances, a former Dutch international. Aaron Zahavi, a 34-year-old Israeli striker. He scored more than 300 career goals across his various stations. And of course, Mario Götze. I mean, there's no introduction needed there. And it's just wonderful to see how Götze has resurrected his career in Holland. He's been on a bit of a downward spiral since scoring that game-winning goal in the 2014 World Cup final. But he's really rediscovered himself at PSV last season. And he started this campaign on red-hot form again. It's more than just his 5 goals and 4 assists in all competitions, but I mean, he looked sharper and fitter than ever before. I saw a wonderful statistic circulating social media the other week, which kind of detailed his performance against Real Sociedad, where he made 4.3 kilometers of high intensity runs. And this is the highest recorded number since PSV instituted tracking data at the club. I think this kind of just shows kind of the physical nick that he is in, and something we haven't seen from him since he was kind of a teenager breaking on under Jurgen Klopp at Dortmund. And I think I don't want to get as carried away as some other German journalists who are beginning to kind of call for him to return to the national team. But it is really extraordinary to see how, you know, a player who was written off a couple of years ago is now having his 2nd spring under Roger Schmidt. He's also becoming a bit of a mentor to this younger talent. And that's exactly where we're going to go to next, because, I mean, boys, there are a ton of this young talent. You have academy graduates like Cody Gakpo and Yorbi Vertesse, Tifo football's finest in Ibrahim Sangara, and the one I really wanted to shine a special light on, that would be English U21 international Noni Madueke. Since leaving the Spurs Academy in 2019, he's absolutely skyrocketed into the biggest attacking talent in Dutch football. I know that Tom at Firsttimefinish wrote a brilliant article about him a couple of weeks ago. But I don't know, Ben, if you wanted to add a bit about what is just a great talent in English football.
Yeah, I think Madueke is, I really like him as a player. He's just someone who's fun to watch. I can't really add anything else other than Tom's article. I think
I'm a big Madueke.
Go for it, Alex.
I'm a big Madueke fan. Did a video on him recently, actually. I think Madueke is one of the best English talents to come out recently. His whole background of he joined Crystal Palace, and then his time at Spurs, and just the hype around him at the time of just how well he scored. He was like the captain of the under-16 side at like 15. He's really been one of the gems in English football, and it's like before he even moved to PSV. And the thing that I really like about him that makes me think he's going to go to the top is his mentality. The reason he went to PSV was because he sat down with his mum and was just like, I've got offers in. I want first team football. I won't get out of Tottenham. So we're going to work out where's the best place to go to develop my career and get that first team football. And PSV is chosen as a place just because of his reputation of that. And since then, like, he's kind of blasted through each rank. I think he's going through a bit of a patch recently. Definitely after what happened in the summer, there was a big transfer sort of thing. I think the hype's kind of got to him a little bit. But yeah, I'm a big believer in Madueke. I reckon we're going to see him come to the Premier League in about 2 seasons' time and really tear things up.
Yeah, I really like the point you made there about, making this decision for team football, because, 6 goals this season, 9 last campaign. And I mean, it's a player that can still play youth football. He's 9 years old. He would be in his final year of U19's football. So, I mean, it's just brilliant to see how he's trying to come on and really taking this opportunity with 2 hands. And I think this is kind of a topic that brings me to my next point, his goal scoring form and why he's able to register such incredible contributions from a wing position is because PSV operate with this inverted winger model. I see a lot of Liverpool on this side. You have the likes of Bruno and Gakpo on the left operating as this almost Sadio Mane-esque figure that looks to always cut in on his right foot. And then you have Madueke and Ritso Doan on the right, who are kind of the Mohamed Salah in this analogy. They're always looking to come in on that left foot and then unleash a shot far corner. And then they finally, to finish off this little Liverpool rant here, you have 2 technical center forwards in Götze and Zahavi, who kind of their main priority is just to bring in these other attacking winners into the game, linking up play, being that kind of link man between midfield and the attack. And so they're really primarily there to register assists in this Firmino role. And I really like this because it allows the likes of Gakpo and Madueke to kind of show their talents as a finisher and not be confined to just a role where they're set out wide, need to beat 3 or 4 players before they're even in dangerous situations, but they're really getting the ball in and around the box and then right away becoming a dangerous threat on goal. And I mean, we mentioned Madueke primarily, but I think another guy is, of course, Cody Gakpo. He started pretty much every game so far this season and even captained the side at 22 years old. So he's definitely one to look out for alongside Madueke on the other flank. And I mean, whilst they're not exactly having Mane Salah efficiency quite yet, it's exciting vertical football with 2 of the brightest young talents in world football. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And that kind of concludes this episode today. So those are our 8 teams to watch. I want to give a big thank you again to Alex and Ben and Tom for joining me today. But before we leave, I just want to briefly open it up to the panel once more. Is there any clubs that we didn't mention here that we want to just give a little brief nod to? We don't need to go full in depth, but maybe just 1 or 2 words about them.
Crystal Palace. I mention every time they were tipped to get relegated and are back to the hunt.
Great shout.
Yeah, I think they could have a very promising season under Vieira. Not finish high necessarily, but play a lot of fun, attractive football.
Yeah, and when it comes to the transfer windows, I think that they would probably be in my top 8. If we're just saying best transfer windows, biggest rebuild, I think Crystal Palace are definitely one to watch. It's no more Roy Hodgson boring with Gary Cahill at the back heading balls away. So if you're into that, maybe find a new club this season. But Ben, is there anyone that you'd like to briefly mention here before we head off?
Probably Ferencváros. I was it's a biased choice because
very left field shout.
They're my club. Last season, they almost drove Juventus away from home, and they're very well side. They just had Stoger come in, who used to manage Borussia Dortmund a few years ago, and he's made them into a very drilled side who almost got a point at Bayer Leverkusen in the Europa League just last week. And they look dangerous on the counter, and there's a few exciting players in there who I think could be not top 5 league moves, potentially top 5 league moves, but moving into the likes of PSV and Genk and Anderlecht and those kind of teams. So I'd keep an eye out on them because I think they could surprise a few. They're a very ambitious club. They've made waves in around Eastern Europe, signing Zeljko Gravric, who's a very highly rated player from Red Star Belgrade. He was their big thing. I mean, Red Star Belgrade produce a lot of big talent, and they signed him for just €1 million this summer, which was a big thing in Eastern Europe. So I keep an eye out on them. And Gavrich is not even a starter. He's still kind of adjusting. They just signed Marco Marin. He's not going to be, unfortunately, he's not going to be playing in the Europa League, but he's someone to keep an eye on. And Mohamed Besic, who didn't have the best of times in England, but he's a big Ferencváros legend.
Yeah, it's a great shout there, Ben. It's maybe not a club that everybody's familiar with, but I mean, in Hungarian football, they're definitely the dominant outfit. 32 league titles, 20 Fruit Cup triumphs. So they're definitely, that is a big fixture in the Hungarian top flight, and is one to look out for.
They're just trying to make waves in Europe. This is like their third season on the bounce now, where they've made the group stages of either the Europa League or the Champions League. So it's definitely, they're a club on the up.
Yeah, I think that's the best way of putting it. And you also mentioned that Marco Marin transfer. That's one that completely slipped my mind, but also a really cool one that I think will be interesting for a lot of fans to look out for, because some may remember him from his great days at Werder Bremen. Some remember him from his less so great days at Chelsea. And it's definitely a player that is kind of always an interesting one to look out for. And even though he's kind of nearing the end of it at 32 years old, he still has a lot of attacking talent to bring. Yeah. And finally, go ahead, Ben.
Because when he signed for Ferencváros, he said that he was actually like considering retirement, but then the offer came from Ferencváros, and he thought, you know what, I'm still fairly fit, and I've still got a couple of more years in me left. So, I'm curious to see how he does.
Yeah, and talking about curious, that goes on to my final team here, because I'm going to go with AS Roma, because I think just the storyline, what's going on there is just going to be so in the watch this season. You have, of course, Jose Mourinho back in Italy, the league which he's probably the most revered in out of all of the top 4 leagues in the world. And of course, Tammy Abraham as well. And just the start that he's at, I mean, he's really just become already a fan favorite in his short time there. And I'm just pulling up the league table here quickly, because they've been off to a very good start. 5 games played, 4 wins, 1 loss. And in the European Conference League, they're also amongst the title candidates. So it's very interesting to see what goes on there. And Sunday evening, you even have the Rome Derby to look forward to. So to catch a bit of action from them, that's definitely one to tune into. But that'll kind of finish us off for today. So Alex and Ben, it's been a pleasure to have you both here. Before we leave, then, is there anything either one of you would like to plug for the listeners?
Breaking the Lines. Just go to Breaking the Lines. It's been a good show.
Perfect. And Ben, on your part?
Yeah, I mean, I can only echo what Alex has said. If you're interested in Kamaldeen Sulemana, definitely follow me and check out my article that's coming out soon, or Firsttimefinish. I've had a very long discussion with his scout just about Right to Dream and Norshaland. If people don't know about the project, they've produced Mikhail Damsgaard, Mohamed Kudus, and it's a very interesting project. And I was fortunate enough to have a very detailed conversation with Jeremy Seafall, who's one of the main architects of the project, and he rates Kamaldeen very highly. The way he spoke about him was very interesting. He told me Kamaldeen has no ceiling, which is something special, and he's someone who's scouted in Africa for a long time. He's watched Mohamed Salah develop in Egypt, compared Kamaldeen to Sadio Mane, which I think is a fair comparison. So yeah, if I could plug anything, I'm excited about that article coming out.
Yeah, really looking forward to that as well. So we'll leave it there for today. That was the 5th episode of the European Football Show. Another great show for you guys this evening. And on Friday, we'll be back with a Bundesliga special this time around. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again, Alex. Thanks again, Ben. And we'll catch you guys next time.